I thought turning 18 meant freedom, but instead my father looked me in the eyes and said, "You're not my real daughter anyway," right in front of our entire family. What happened next shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. My name is Celeste Walsh, and up until 3 months ago, I believed I knew exactly who I was. I was the older daughter in what seemed like a perfectly normal suburban family. My dad, Raymond, worked in construction management. My stepmother, Vivian, taught elementary school, and my 15-year-old half-brother, Camden, was the golden child who could do no wrong. We lived in a 2-story house with white shutters on Maple Street, complete with a front yard that Vivian obsessed over and a back deck where we held family barbecues every 4th of July. But here's the thing about families. Sometimes the people sitting around your dinner table are hiding secrets so big they can split your world in half. I always felt different in the Walsh house. While Camden got hugs and praise for bringing home B- grades, I worked nights at the local diner just to hear Raymond grunt approval when I made honor roll. Vivian would ruffle Camden's hair when he tracked mud through her pristine kitchen, but she'd give me silent treatment for leaving a coffee mug in the sink. I told myself it was normal step-family dynamics, that Raymond just needed more time to warm up to me since I wasn't his biological child. What I didn't know was that every adult in my extended family was walking around with a secret that would change everything. My grandmother, Nora, lived with us after her stroke 2 years ago. She spent most days in her wheelchair by the living room window, watching the neighborhood kids ride their bikes and making sharp observations about everyone who walked by. Despite being 78 and needing help with daily tasks, her mind was razor sharp. She noticed things, she remembered things, and she had been keeping the biggest secret of all. My Aunt Petra and Uncle Morris lived just 20 minutes away and came to every family gathering. Petra was Raymond's younger sister, bubbly and warm in a way that made you want to tell her all your problems. Morris was quieter, the kind of man who listened more than he talked. But when he did speak, people paid attention. They'd been married for 18 years, but never had children. Petra always said they were complete as they were, but I sometimes caught Morris watching me with this strange expression I couldn't quite read. Camden, my half-brother, was everything I wasn't in Raymond's eyes. Athletic where I was bookish, confident where I was careful, naturally charming where I had to work for every smile. He wasn't cruel to me, just indifferent in that way teenage boys are when they don't see you as important enough to acknowledge. But lately, even Camden seemed to sense the growing tension in our house. The tension had been building for months. As my 18th birthday approached, Raymond grew more distant. Conversations about my college plans made him leave the room. When I brought home my acceptance letter to State University, he barely looked at it. Vivian started making comments about young adults finding their own way in the world with increasing frequency. I felt like I was living with people who were counting down the days until they could be done with me. I should have known something was coming. The signs were all there. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened on my 18th birthday, when one sentence from Raymond would unravel 18 years of lies and reveal a truth so shocking that it would rewrite my entire understanding of who I was and where I belonged. That birthday dinner was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it became the night that split my life into before and after, before I knew the truth and after everything changed forever. Growing up as Celeste Walsh meant learning to read the room before I even walked into it. I became an expert at measuring the temperature of my family's mood, adjusting my voice to match what they needed to hear, and making myself small enough to avoid conflict, but visible enough to avoid being forgotten entirely. The Walsh family operated on an unspoken hierarchy that everyone understood except me. Raymond sat at the top, his approval the prize we all competed for in different ways. Vivian held the second position, managing the household and our social calendar with military precision. Camden occupied the coveted spot of beloved son, effortlessly earning praise for mediocre efforts. And then there was me, floating somewhere in the margins, working twice as hard for half the recognition. My childhood memories are filled with moments that should have been red flags. When Camden broke Vivian's favorite vase playing football in the living room, she laughed and said, "Boys will be boys." When I accidentally knocked over a plant while helping her rearrange furniture, she gave me the silent treatment for 3 days. When Camden brought home a C in algebra, Raymond took him out for ice cream and said math was hard for everyone. When I brought home straight A's, Raymond would nod once and ask if I'd finished my chores. I told myself these differences were normal, stepfamilies were complicated. Raymond had married my mother when I was 3, after my biological father disappeared from our lives. My mother died in a car accident when I was 5, leaving Raymond to raise another man's child alongside his own son with Vivian. I convinced myself that his emotional distance was understandable, even justified. He'd stepped up when he didn't have to. I owed him gratitude, not complaints. But gratitude is exhausting when it's one-sided. I spent my teenage years trying to earn my place in the family I'd been born into. I worked part-time jobs to buy my own clothes and school supplies, not because we couldn't afford them, but because I sensed that asking for things created tension. I maintained perfect grades because academic success was the one area where I could shine without competing directly with Camden's athletic achievements. I helped Vivian with household projects, hoping that if I proved useful enough, she might start seeing me as a daughter instead of an obligation. The extended family gatherings were the hardest to navigate. Every few months, we'd host dinner for Aunt Petra, Uncle Morris, and Grandmother Nora. These evenings followed a predictable pattern. Petra would gush over Camden's latest accomplishments, while Morris listened with genuine interest. Nora would hold court from her wheelchair, sharing neighborhood gossip and family memories with the authority of the family matriarch. Vivian would play the perfect hostess, ensuring everyone's needs were met, while subtly highlighting her role as the cornerstone of our happy home. I always felt like I was watching these gatherings from the outside, even when I was sitting at the table. Conversations flowed around me without including me. Family jokes referenced shared experiences I hadn't been part of. Photo albums came out featuring trips and celebrations that happened before I was old enough to remember or after I'd been conveniently left out. I learned to smile and nod, to laugh at the right moments, and to excuse myself early to avoid the inevitable melancholy that settled over me during these supposedly joyful occasions. But lately, something had shifted. The undercurrent of tension that had always existed in our house was becoming impossible to ignore. Raymond's silence toward me had evolved from distant to cold. Vivian's passive-aggressive comments were becoming more frequent and less subtle. Even Camden seemed uncomfortable, catching glimpses of dynamics he was too young to fully understand but old enough to recognize as wrong. The change accelerated as my 18th birthday approached. College acceptance letters arrived, and instead of celebration, they brought a chill to the house. Raymond would leave the room when I tried to discuss my plans. Vivian started making pointed comments about young adults needing to find their own way and learn independence. I felt like I was living with people who were counting down the days until I became someone else's responsibility. 3 weeks before my birthday, I overheard a heated conversation between Raymond and Vivian in their bedroom. The words were muffled, but I caught fragments. 18 years, Raymond said. Done my part, came Vivian's response. Not fair to Camden was the phrase that made my stomach drop. They were planning something, and it involved my departure from their lives. I should have confronted them. I should have demanded answers to the questions that had been building inside me for years. Instead, I threw myself into work and school, hoping that if I could just make it to graduation, I could leave on my own terms rather than being pushed out. My 18th birthday was supposed to mark the beginning of my adult life. Instead, it became the day when 18 years of carefully constructed lies finally crumbled, revealing a truth that would change everything I thought I knew about my family, my identity, and my place in the world. The birthday dinner started wrong from the moment I walked into our dining room. Vivian had set the table with her good china, the pale blue set she usually reserved for Christmas and Easter. But something about the careful arrangement felt more like a formal goodbye than a celebration. The extended family had already arrived. Aunt Petra sat across from Uncle Morris, both of them wearing expressions I couldn't quite read. Grandmother Nora was positioned in her wheelchair at the head of the table, her sharp eyes taking in everything with the intensity of someone who knew secrets were about to spill. Camden had actually dressed up for the occasion, trading his usual basketball shorts for khakis and a button-down shirt. Even he seemed to sense that tonight was different, more significant than our typical family gatherings. Raymond sat at his usual spot, but instead of his normal pre-dinner small talk about work or the weather, he remained silent, methodically cutting his steak with mechanical precision. "So, Celeste," Vivian began, her voice carrying that artificially sweet tone she used when she wanted to sound caring in front of witnesses. 18 years old, that's such an important milestone, the beginning of real adulthood. I forced a smile and thanked everyone for coming. Aunt Petra had brought me a gift card to the campus bookstore, and Uncle Morris had quietly slipped me an envelope that I assumed contained money for college expenses. Even Grandmother Nora had managed to get me a small, wrapped box, though her arthritis made gift wrapping nearly impossible. Their kindness made the growing coldness from Raymond and Vivian even more obvious. "Have you given any more thought to your plans after graduation?" Vivian continued, dabbing her lips with her napkin. The question sounded innocent enough, but I could hear the edge underneath it. "I'm planning to start at State University in the fall," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've been saving money from work, and with the partial scholarship, I think I can manage the first year without too much help." Raymond's fork scraped against his plate, the sound sharp enough to make Camden flinch. "Help," he repeated, the word dripping with something between resentment and disgust. "You've been getting help your entire life, Celeste. 18 years of food, clothing, shelter, and education. Most people would consider that enough help." The temperature in the room dropped noticeably. Aunt Petra set down her water glass and looked between Raymond and me with growing concern. Uncle Morris stopped eating entirely, his attention focused completely on the unfolding conversation. "Raymond," Grandmother Nora said quietly, her voice carrying a warning that made everyone pause. "No, Mom," Raymond continued, his voice gaining momentum like a train building speed. "She needs to hear this. She needs to understand how the real world works before she goes off to college with grand expectations about who owes her what." I felt my cheeks burning with embarrassment and confusion. "I never said anyone owed me anything. I've been working since I was 16. I pay for my own gas, my own clothes, my own phone bill. I just thought that maybe, since you raised me, you might want to help me succeed." Vivian laughed, a sound so sharp it could have cut glass. "Raised you," she repeated. "Well, isn't that interesting phrasing?" Camden looked between his parents with obvious discomfort. This was territory even he had never seen them venture into before. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about gratitude," Vivian replied, her mask of sweetness finally slipping completely. "I'm talking about a young woman who has lived in our house, eaten our food, and used our resources for 15 years, and now expects us to fund her college dreams as if she's entitled to it." "Entitled to it?" I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I've never felt entitled to anything in this house. I've spent my entire life trying to earn my place here, trying to prove that I belonged, that I was worth keeping around." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had been smoldering for years. Everyone stared at me, and for a moment, I thought I might have finally broken through the wall that had always existed between me and the people who were supposed to be my family. Instead, Raymond stood up, his face hard as granite. His voice was cold, calculated, designed to inflict maximum damage. "You want to know about your place? You really want to know?" "Raymond, don't," Uncle Morris said, speaking up for the first time all evening. But Raymond was beyond stopping. 18 years of something I didn't understand had built up inside him, and tonight it was all coming out. He looked directly at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not just anger or frustration, but something deeper. Something that looked almost like relief. "Pack your bags tonight," he said, each word deliberate and final. "You're 18 now, so you're not my responsibility anymore. Besides, you're not my real daughter anyway." The room exploded into silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Vivian tried to hide her satisfied smile behind her napkin, but I caught it. Camden's mouth fell open in shock. Aunt Petra gasped audibly, and Grandmother Nora's eyes filled with a fury I'd never seen before. The silence that followed Raymond's declaration felt like being underwater. I could see everyone's mouths moving, but the sound seemed muffled and distant. My legs felt weak, and I gripped the back of my chair to keep from falling. 18 years of feeling. Like an outsider suddenly made perfect sense, but understanding why didn't make the pain any less devastating. Camden was the first to find his voice. "Dad, what do you mean she's not your real daughter? You've always said her mom died when she was little, and you married her before that." Vivian shot Camden a sharp look that clearly meant he should stop talking, but the damage was already done. The careful story they'd constructed about my origins was starting to crack under the weight of Raymond's anger. "Your father means exactly what he said," Vivian replied, her voice now free of any pretense of warmth. "Celeste isn't Raymond's biological daughter. We've done our duty raising her, but she's an adult now. It's time she learned to stand on her own 2 feet. Aunt Petra pushed back from the table so forcefully that her chair nearly tipped over. "Raymond Walsh, have you lost your mind? This is a child we're talking about. Your child, in every way that matters." "She's not my child," Raymond snapped back. "She never was. I married her mother and agreed to take on the responsibility, but that responsibility ends now." I wanted to run from the room, to escape to my bedroom and lock the door until this nightmare ended. But something kept me frozen in place. Maybe it was shock, or maybe it was the desperate need to finally understand the truth about my life. Either way, I found myself still standing there watching my family tear itself apart around me. Uncle Morris stood up slowly, his face flushed with an anger I'd never seen from him before. "That's enough, Raymond. This has gone too far." "Stay out of this, Morris," Raymond warned. "This is family business." "Family business?" Uncle Morris's voice rose with each word. "You're talking about throwing an 18-year-old girl out on the street on her birthday because she's not biologically yours? What kind of man does that?" Grandmother Nora had been silent during this entire exchange, but I could see her hands gripping the arms of her wheelchair so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, and for a moment I worried the stress might trigger another stroke. "Grandma Nora, are you okay?" I asked, moving toward her wheelchair. Despite everything that had just happened, my first instinct was still to take care of the people I loved, even when they were destroying me. She looked up at me with eyes that held a mixture of love, rage, and something else I couldn't identify. When she spoke, her voice was stronger than it had been in months. "Sweet girl, come here to me." I knelt beside her wheelchair, and she reached out to take my hand in both of hers. Her skin was paper thin, but her grip was surprisingly firm. "Celeste, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You are loved, you are wanted, and you belong in this family more than you know." Raymond scoffed. "Mom, don't fill her head with fairy tales. She needs to face reality." Grandmother Nora's head snapped up with a speed that surprised everyone. The fury in her eyes was so intense that Raymond actually took a step backward. "Raymond Marcus Walsh, I have kept my mouth shut for 15 years watching this family tear itself apart. I've watched you treat this precious girl like a burden when she's been nothing but a blessing. I've watched your wife poison you against a child who needed nothing more than to be loved. But I will not sit here and watch you destroy her on her 18th birthday." Vivian's face went pale. "Nora, you need to calm down. This isn't good for your health." "My health?" Grandmother Nora laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Do you know what's not good for my health? Watching my son turn into a man I don't recognize. Watching him hurt a child who deserves better. Watching this family live a lie that's destroying everyone in it." She turned to look at each person around the table, her gaze lingering longest on Uncle Morris, who had gone completely still. Something passed between them, some kind of silent communication that made the hair on my arms stand up. 15 years, she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. 15 years I've watched and waited and hoped that someone would do the right thing. 15 years of watching Morris and Petra's hearts break every time they had to pretend. 15 years of watching Raymond punish an innocent child for choices made by adults. Uncle Morris made a sound that was half gasp, half sob. Aunt Petra grabbed his arm, her face white as paper. Grandmother Nora looked directly at Raymond, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "John, should I tell her who her real father is?" The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. Raymond's face drained of all color, and for the first time in my life I saw fear in his eyes. The question hung in the air like a live wire, crackling with 18 years of suppressed truth. Raymond's face went from flushed anger to paper white in the span of a heartbeat. Vivian's satisfied smile vanished completely, replaced by something that looked like panic. Camden stared at his grandmother as if she'd just spoken in a foreign language, but it was Uncle Morris who gave away the secret before Grandmother Nora could say another word. He buried his face in his hands and let out a broken sound that was somewhere between a sob and a sigh of relief. Aunt Petra wrapped her arms around him, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "It's okay, honey. It's finally okay." "Morris," I whispered, the pieces of my shattered world starting to rearrange themselves into a pattern I never could have imagined. Grandmother Nora's grip on my hand tightened. "Yes, sweet girl. Morris is your father, your real father." The room erupted. Camden shot to his feet, knocking over his water glass. "What, Uncle Morris? That's impossible." Raymond slammed his fist on the table so hard the good china jumped. "Mom, you promised you would. Never tell. You swore to me." "I swore to protect this family," Grandmother Nora replied, her voice steady despite the chaos around us. "But protecting lies isn't the same as protecting people, and I won't let you destroy my granddaughter over a secret that should have been shared years ago." I looked at Uncle Morris, searching his face for the truth. Now that I knew, I could see it. The way he'd always watched me with such intensity during family gatherings, the way he remembered every detail about my school achievements, my part-time jobs, my college plans, the way he'd quietly slip me that envelope tonight, just like he'd done on every birthday and Christmas for years. "How?" I managed to ask, though my voice came out as barely a whisper. Aunt Petra wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. "Your mother, Sarah, was Raymond's girlfriend before he met Vivian. When they broke up, she and Morris had a brief relationship. Neither of them expected anything serious to come from it. But then, Sarah found out she was pregnant." Uncle Morris finally lifted his head from his hands. His eyes were red, but when he looked at me, I saw something I'd never seen from Raymond. Love without conditions, without reservations, without the weight of obligation. Sarah was scared. She was 22, working as a waitress with no family support. When she told me about the pregnancy, I wanted to marry her, to raise you together, but she was still in love with Raymond. "So she went back to him," I said, the story becoming clear, even as it broke my heart all over again. "Raymond agreed to marry her and raise you as his own," Grandmother Nora continued. "He loved Sarah, and he thought he could love her child too. For a while, it worked. But after Sarah died in that car accident when you were 5, everything changed." Vivian had been silent during this revelation, but now she spoke up, her voice defensive and sharp. Raymond was grieving. He'd lost his wife, and suddenly he was alone with a child who wasn't even his. When we got married, I thought we could be a real family, but she was always there, always reminding us of Sarah, of the mess that came before. "The mess?" Uncle Morris stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "My daughter is not a mess. She's the most incredible person in this room, and you've spent 15 years trying to make her feel worthless because you were jealous of a dead woman." "Your daughter," Raymond repeated, his voice hollow. 15 years I've been raising your daughter, and you never said a word. You came to every birthday party, every Christmas morning, every graduation ceremony, and you watched me struggle with resentment toward a child who didn't deserve it." "I wanted to tell her," Uncle Morris said, his voice breaking. "Every single day for 15 years I wanted to tell her, but you begged me not to. You said it would confuse her, hurt her, destroy the family. You promised you would love her like your own." "And Petra?" I turned to my aunt, who was still crying quietly. "You knew, too." Aunt Petra nodded. "We couldn't have children of our own. Do you have any idea how hard it's been, watching our daughter grow up in another family? Watching you try so hard to earn love from people who should have given it freely. We've been putting money in a college fund for you since you were 5, hoping that someday we'd be able to tell you the truth and help you openly." Camden, who had been silent through most of this revelation, finally spoke up. "So Celeste isn't my half-sister. She's my cousin." "She's your family," Grandmother Nora said firmly, "just like she's always been family to all of us, whether Raymond wanted to admit it or not." I looked around the room at these people who had shaped my entire life while hiding the most fundamental truth about who I was. Raymond, who had raised me out of obligation disguised as love; Vivian, who had resented my very existence; Morris and Petra, who had loved me from a distance for 18 years; and Grandmother Nora, who had finally found the courage to set us all free. The revelation hung in the air like dust after an explosion, settling slowly over the wreckage of everything I thought I knew about my life. For several minutes, nobody spoke. We all just sat there processing the weight of a truth that had been buried for 18 years and had finally clawed its way to the surface. Raymond was the first to break down. I'd never seen him cry before, but now tears streamed down his face as he slumped back into his chair. "God, Celeste, what have I done to you?" His voice was barely recognizable, stripped of all the authority and coldness I'd grown accustomed to. 18 years of making you feel like you had to earn your place in this house, when the truth is, you were the best thing that ever happened to our family. I didn't know how to respond to this version of Raymond. The man who had spent my entire childhood making me feel like a burden was suddenly looking at me with something that might have been love, or maybe just regret so deep it resembled love. "I was so angry," he continued, his voice shaking. "Not at you, never really at you. I was angry at Sarah for leaving me the first time, angry at Morris for having what I thought was mine, angry at myself for agreeing to a situation I wasn't emotionally equipped to handle. Every time I looked at you, I saw all of that pain, and instead of dealing with it like an adult, I took it out on an innocent child." Uncle Morris, my father, stood up and walked around the table toward me. For 18 years, I'd hugged this man at family gatherings without knowing he was hugging his own daughter. Now as he approached, I could see the weight of all those missed moments in his eyes. "Celeste," he said, stopping just a few feet away from me, "I know I have no right to ask for anything from you. I gave up that right when I agreed to stay silent, but I need you to know that not a single day has passed in 18 years when I didn't think about you, didn't wonder what you were learning in school, didn't worry about whether you were happy." I stood up and walked into his arms. It felt like coming home to a place I'd never been before. He held me like he'd been waiting 18 years for this moment, which I suppose he had. "I have so many questions," I whispered against his shoulder. "I have so many answers," he whispered back, "and all the time in the world to give them to you." Aunt Petra joined us, wrapping her arms around both of us. "We set up a room for you at our house years ago," she said through her tears. "I know it sounds crazy, but we've been preparing for this day, hoping for it, even when we didn't know if it would ever come." But it was Camden who surprised me the most. My half-brother, who had been the golden child his entire life, walked over and put his hand on my shoulder. "Celeste, I'm sorry. I know I didn't cause this situation, but I should have stood up for you. I could see how different Mom and Dad treated you, and I just went along with it because it was easier for me." "Camden, you were just a kid," I said, but he shook his head. "So were you, and you deserved better from all of us." Vivian remained seated at the table, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. "I suppose I should apologize too," she said quietly, "but I'm not sure an apology can fix 15 years of treating you like an inconvenience." "You're right," I replied, surprising everyone, including myself, with the steadiness of my voice. "An apology can't fix that, but acknowledgement is a start." Grandmother Nora wheeled her chair closer to our group. I should have spoken up years ago. I told myself I was protecting everyone by keeping the secret, but really, I was just taking the easy path. You deserved to know who your real parents were. Morris and Petra deserved to raise their daughter, and Raymond deserved to know the truth so he could work through his feelings instead of taking them out on you. "Why now?" I asked her. "Why tonight?" She smiled, and for the first time in months, it reached her eyes. Because I'm dying, sweet girl, and I refuse to take this secret to my grave while watching my family destroy itself over lies. The college fund that Morris and Petra had been building turned out to be substantial. More than substantial. They'd been saving and investing for 15 years, preparing for the day when they could openly support their daughter's education. Raymond, humbled by his own failures, insisted on contributing as well. "Let me do this one thing right," he said. "Let me help send you to college like a father should." 3 months later, I started my freshman year at State University with not just financial support, but with something I'd never had before, a family that fought for me instead of just tolerating me. Morris and Petra invited me to live with them, but I chose to split my time between both houses. Raymond and I started therapy together, working through 18 years of miscommunication and hurt. Even Vivian began to soften, perhaps realizing that her jealousy had poisoned not just my childhood, but her marriage as well. Grandmother Nora passed away peacefully in her sleep 2 weeks into my first semester. Her funeral was packed with people whose lives she'd touched, whose secrets she'd kept, whose families she'd held together through sheer force of will. Her last gift to me was a letter explaining that family isn't just about blood or genetics. It's about the people who choose to love you, fight for you, and see your worth even when you can't see it yourself. I learned that sometimes the people who raise you aren't your real parents, and sometimes your real parents are the ones who've been loving you from a distance, waiting for the chance to love you up close. But most importantly, I learned that belonging isn't something you have to earn. You either belong or you don't, and the people who make you work for their love were never really your family to begin with. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments what family means to you. Have you ever discovered something about your family that changed everything? I read every comment, and I love hearing your stories too. And if you want to hear more stories about family, secrets, and finding where you belong, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for listening to my story, and remember, you belong exactly where you're meant to be.